Welcome to the official release of the RCIPS Annual Crime and Traffic Statistics Report for 2021. I'm Chanel Amon, I'm the Communications Manager for the Office of the Commissioner of the Police. The media present have been given a copy of the report under embargo yesterday to review and prepare for today's press conference. Shortly, our panel will provide opening remarks, and then the floor will be open for media to ask questions regarding the report to our panel members, who include Chief Officer of the Office of the Commissioner of Police and Commissioner of Police, Derek Byrne, Deputy Commissioner of Police, Kurt Walton, and Head of our Criminal Investigations and Economic Crime Unit, Detective Superintendent Peter Lansdowne. We're also joined by a number of representatives from various units across the RCIPS who are here in studio and may be called upon to answer questions where required. After the official Q&A, our staff will be available for any questions the media may have. So to get started, I'll hand over to the Commissioner of Police, Derek Byrne, for opening remarks on the 2021 report.
Thank you, Chanel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, members of the media, and thank you for joining us for the launch of our 2021 Statistical Report. And the key highlights, maybe just by way of introductory comment. 2021 levels of recorded crime remained controlled and stable, and end-of-year figures showed an increase of 140 crimes, or 3.9% over 2020. This increase occurred mainly in the theft offences category. For the fourth successive year, there has been a reduction in burglary commissions across the island. During 2021, there was a concerning increase in firearms-related crimes, which included gang-related shootings. We had 2 murders recorded, resulting in 3 fatalities, 2 as a result of one incident. The RCIPS responded quickly, making early arrests, which disrupted and dismantled the gang element. Some persons were charged and 6 illegal firearms were recovered, taken from the streets. Unfortunately, during 2021, we had 9 fatalities on our roads, and I suppose a piece of information that maybe not be included in the report. As of yesterday, we've had 5 fatalities so far this year. So the trending is concerning in terms of our road fatalities. Overall, crime remains very stable in the Cayman Islands, and a key message then is that the borders are open. Cayman Islands remains a very safe place to live, to work, to visit, to come here on vacation, to retire, to invest. We're ready for the persons or tourism trade to accelerate over the coming months, and we look forward to receiving visitors, tourists on the islands. And I'm joined by the senior management team here, and we're available to answer any questions we can from our media colleagues.
Wendy from CNS, would you like to come up and ask questions? Okay, And Wendy, if you're referring to something specific in the report, can you just mention the page you're referring to?
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, Wendy.
First of all, the calls for service. So a lot of these calls for service don't appear, they're not crimes, but obviously people are calling 911 and they're asking for the police for various different reasons. And I see that you describe some as public and environmental. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so in general terms, Wendy, what we're saying is they are non-core function police calls. They may be alarm calls, they may be material damage, traffic accidents. We were speaking yesterday about one call where parents had called us because a child wouldn't do their homework. So we receive, some are dogs barking, some are dogs wandering loose in the community. So it encapsulates or captures a whole load of non-core police functions. And I think there's a very interesting comment on page, I don't know if you've picked it up or not, but in our report, if you go to page 11 of the report, and we say that in 2021, the 5 most common types of incidents or calls for RCIPS service response were civil dispute, public environmental, MVA, alarm and person in distress, and they make up 36%. And
Yeah,
that
that's what I was
36
asking. The public environmental, what is that specifically?
So I think I've kind of said.
It's these
what
kind
it
of
is.
things, like you
It's a
said, the kid
non-core.
not doing their homework.
But I just take you to the earlier one, where the probably corollary of that then, that amounts to 12,227 incidents of calls for service, where only 12 are converted to crimes.
Do you see that as an issue in that there could be some other, like, is that impacting your job?
Yeah.
Or, as you say, we like to be ahead of the game, so it's kind of crime prevention as well? Or how do you review it?
So there's two elements to this. First of all, they are predominantly non-core functions. If I have a total of 34,093 calls, which is recorded on page 11, and I'm telling you that 12,227 didn't reach a crime category, it means 33% of my calls are non-core functions. They are effectively convenience activities. And a lot of this will be alarms to private dwellings. So although the alarm is contracted to an alarm company, the alarm company ring the police respond. So that is considered to be non-core and convenience activity. And the objective in the long term is to shed that function. But to shed that function, I have to have some kind of an understanding. Someone has to take it on. So I cannot just shed it without a change management program. I have to engage with the alarm companies or whoever it might be that I have to do, who should primarily be dealing with the calls as a matter of primacy. So it's work in progress. We've identified it. It's here recorded in it that we would have 12,227 less calls potentially if we weren't dealing with minor material damage, traffic accidents that people believe they should be reporting but don't require to report to us, and domestic alarm calls where the police are being recalled or are called out to deal with domestic alarm calls. And other calls that dogs barking, and as I said, that example is extreme of a child not doing homework, but it's a call that goes to 911 and police are dispatched.
Okay. The other major issue that obviously is of a public interest is not so much the conviction rate, the detection rate.
Yeah.
Is the RCIPS measuring this yet? And if so, can you explain to us what your detection rates are? And if it's not doing it, when do you anticipate that you'll be able to do it? Because I remember even Jackie talking about that quite a few years ago.
So it's work in progress, and we are updating our records management system as we go along. And there are what's called leading and lagging indicators. So a crime could occur middle June, but may not be detected until January the following year because of an investigation that's not detected until the DPP says prosecute. So again, we get the file completed. There are a whole lot of strands that we need to pull together to get accurate detection rates. We can give general detection rates that, for instance, we know we had 3 machete attacks over the weekend. We effectively, if we're looking at it in terms of detection, we have a 100% detection rate because we know who committed them.
Right.
But we have to prepare the files and we have to send the files to DPP, so they won't be recorded as detections in our stats, but they're actually detected crimes because we're now pursuing definitive suspects for the crimes. There have been several shooting incidents and several other serious assaults who we are targeting suspects for. They are effectively detected, but they're not formally updated on our computer system. So we have some work to go to update our system to record crimes detected, and it has to do with this leading, lagging performance indicator system and the times, and also there's issues around appeal processes being brought in following a conviction, and the final determination doesn't come until the appeal is actually determined.
So what plans have you got to give the public an idea of, because whilst obviously I understand the conviction right at the very end, but there's an element of, because that's not your responsibility. Once it goes to the DPP, in a way, it's kind of off you as a responsibility, because it's up to the prosecutors then to bring it home. But if you've supplied them with the suspect and the evidence, are you recording what you're getting to that point? Because that's something I think the public would appreciate knowing.
Yeah, and I think, and I'll take that as good feedback. So, but to be very clear, the DPP office is completely independent, and they merely decide on the prosecution. The detection is a matter for police solely, and it rests with the police department. And I do think there's a better way of us managing our detection rates. But I wouldn't be. One of my opening comments in this document I've presented is about integrity of data. I want to be sure when I'm mentioning detection rates, I'm giving accurate data with the greatest integrity. So we do have some concerns around how we're recording detection rates. We do have multiple successes, so I'm quite happy that we are detecting serious and even less serious crime. But to try and put that into the crime report to give us detection rates, I think I'm just a little bit away from it, but work in progress.
Okay. Some of the more serious crimes, like obviously last year, the 2 major gang-related shootings in the bars, they remain unsolved. What sort of work continues on those types of crimes when obviously you charge somebody and that person has been released? What work is continuing on those most recent murders?
So there's significant work continuing, and significant work has been done, and significant progress has been made. And I mentioned in my opening remarks, we did very, very quickly get in and dismantle and disrupt those crime gangs. One person has actually been before the court and is convicted and is awaiting sentencing. 6 firearms were recovered, and very, very quickly, you'll be aware the matter was raised at the level of the National Security Council. We were in there with our teams, and very quickly, working with the communities, we got in there and brought that to a very sudden halt without it escalating, and as I said, dismantled and disrupted. So a lot of work done, but there is a lot of background work. I suppose it's intangible to maybe the community, and I'm glad you raised it, that the community would understand the level of work that goes on in the background in terms of the administrative work, pulling together all the various strands, including CCTV examination, ballistic examination, forensic examination, statements from witnesses, including reluctant witnesses, and then presenting that file to the director. And most likely from the director, there will be return questions, additional information required. So some of them can be very lengthy and complex criminal investigations, but you never take your eye off the ball or focus off the investigation. The investigation file remains open, live and active.
I'm glad you mentioned reluctant witnesses, because that continues to be a theme. What do you feel that you can do about it, or what do you think the community can do about this reluctant witnesses?
So effectively, it's building that trust and confidence. I know Detective Superintendent can speak about it a little bit more, but some of our detectives are quite experienced with that, and they spend a lot of time working with witnesses to reassure them. In a small community, I suppose people do have concerns, and personally I feel that's kind of understandable to an extent. We have had some success in turning reluctant witnesses into very good witnesses, and it does require a lot of effort. Initially, I think, and it's probably the experience of the Deputy Commissioner well, who's significant experience in crime investigation, you have to work hard on witnesses to convince them that it's the right thing to do, from a community level, from a personal level, and from a community safety level.
Firearms, do you have a sort of a handle on where these guns are coming from at the moment? Because you've pointed out that firearms crimes have gone up this year. Yeah,
I suppose there's 2 elements to that. How many firearms have we got on island? The answer is I don't know. We believe we have a mix of long arm and short arm. That's the handguns themselves here on island, and other firearms on island. We recovered 6, as I said, in 2021, and so far this year we've recovered 3. So we're satisfied there's more on island. We need more. And you've mentioned community, and I suppose at this stage I could make an appeal to the community. If anybody knows where there are firearms, we're asking earnestly for your cooperation to assist us in confidence as to where these firearms might be, and then we will take it from there in terms of removing firearms from the street. And only in over the weekend and as late as last night, we've had firearms-related crimes. So we do have concerns around the number of firearms that are in the community. The number we don't know, and a lot of it will be down to assistance from the community in terms of guiding us to where these firearms might be. And we will continue to develop our intelligence and conduct intrusive and proactive intelligence-led investigations to recover firearms when we can.
I don't want to rob everybody else's time, so my final question really is just about traffic. Obviously, You've created a new traffic unit. You're putting a lot of resources into traffic. We've got, it looks like, if that figures, is it 36,000 cars on the road at the moment? Is that pretty much on the road, that figure? It says inspected and...
I suppose you know what's registered and what's inspected, and then very unfortunately there could be another sum But we know that the volumes are very, very high.
Yeah.
And our colleagues in DVDL are monitoring and managing that aspect of it. But we do know the volumes are very, very high for the roads infrastructure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously that's a problem, but it's not just that. We do seem to have pretty poor standards of driving. And I don't know whether that's because we have so many people from different countries that obviously have different driving standards and different tests. Is there anything that can be done to perhaps standardise some kind of driving test, or what would you like to see that would perhaps elevate the standard of driving on the roads at the moment?
Well, I think we've spoken about this before, but certainly I think a lot of it is down to personal behaviour. You cannot keep spinning in and out of traffic lanes. You cannot keep exceeding the speed limit. And I've said on more than one occasion, the maximum speed limit on the Cayman Islands is 50 miles an hour, but that's not a target. That's the maximum permissible speed limit. You may only be able to drive safely at 20 miles or 30 miles an hour in any given circumstances. And it's really about drivers taking personal responsibility. I mean, I'm driving, and I suppose most of the people here in the room are driving and seeing some of the very erratic driving behaviour on the roads. Most of those people have completed tests, as I would see it, but they behave irresponsibly on the road. So the answer is for the police to step in, intervene, intercept, and prosecute insofar as we can. And that's the idea of our move to increase our traffic enforcement personnel. And I think we still have a journey to go to put more traffic enforcement personnel in, to send out a clear message and to make our roads much safer. And I did quote the figure of 9 fatalities for 2021. 2020 was 9, 2019 was 8, and we now have 5 in the first quarter. It's really concerning. That number exceeds the number of persons that have been have received fatal injuries in guns as a result of guns and drugs in each of those years. So it is a pretty serious situation, and one that we take very, very seriously.
Okay, has there been any proposals from the police to government to perhaps introduce a retest for like habitual offender people who lose their license more than once, to make them take a test again before they get the license back? Is that? I know some jurisdictions do that.
Yeah, and it can happen, and there is a national road safety strategy being developed. I have seen a number of iterations of that. And we work on the traffic management panel as well. We're represented on that. We work on the transportation board. We work with the director of DVDL, and all of this can be brought back for inclusion in the future go-forward strategy for dealing with this. But courts can order re-examinations and retesting at the request of the police.
Okay, I'll pass on to someone else. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Wendy.
it.
Felicia from Radio Cayman, would you like to come up with questions?
Good morning.
Good morning, Felicia.
So I noticed that on page 10, you guys have a strategic policing plan. If you would just mind verbalizing that for me so you can bring it to life from the paper. The strategic policing plan that you guys have listed on page 10.
This is our, how to achieve our policing plan.
Yeah,
This is at a glance. This is not the plan itself. This is just a summary narrative of what the plan
Could
is
you
about.
just go through a couple of the bullet points with me?
Please, yeah.
Yeah? No, I'm asking you if you could just go through a couple of the bullet points with me, like explain what some of the points are that you have on the plan.
So this is simpliciter at a glance, and it talks about, so the plan itself has been produced and up on the website, and it speaks at our goals and our priorities. It speaks to what we're going to deliver, how we're going to deliver them, and how you'll know we have delivered. So I don't know if there's a specific question you want to, it really is a kind of a schematic or just a pictorial for someone to grasp what it is that's actually in the plan itself.
Are there some ways that maybe people will start to see more police presence to know that you guys really are stepping up the strategic plan to monitor, like, for instance, traffic? I know that you guys have another traffic and policing unit that is for the eastern districts.
Yes.
So people can expect to start seeing more police presence on the streets, monitoring the way that people are driving, for instance.
Sure, that's actually the whole objective of the traffic unit. So what are we going to do? Our goals: understanding the threats, securing the Cayman Islands, ensuring safer communities, and delivering a professional policing service. All encapsulates what you're speaking to there. And on a daily basis, we sit down as a command team and with our team leaders from the various units that are here today, and we ask, what is it that's a threat and a risk? What do we need to do to address this threat and risk? And last Thursday, we graduated 22 new recruits. Thankfully, local talent coming into the service. We've allocated 11 of those to the Eastern Districts, and that was done based on the best scientific analysis we had that our requirement was in the Eastern District. You know, and 3 of those are young recruits that will go into the traffic department for 6 months, and 8 will go on to the shift and be mentored by senior police officers. And that's all geared towards greater visibility, greater response to service, and basically fulfilling our mandate to the community that if you make a call, request policing service, and it is actually something police should be responding to, we will respond.
I've noticed as well that the domestic violence referrals, they keep on steadily inclining from year to year.
Yeah.
Now, why do you think that is? Do you think it's because there are actually more crimes being committed, or people are beginning to feel more comfortable reporting them?
Yeah, and it's twofold. So can we just make sure we differentiate between referrals and crimes?
Okay.
So the referral is step 1 of the process where someone has a concern. And that concern is raised through mandatory reporting requirements for various departments. It's raised by our officers who are more alert to the fact that something should be reported. And it's raised by probably younger persons and families themselves that it should be reported. So it's a bit of the police getting better, the community having a greater understanding and a greater awareness of the existence of the MASH unit and the multiplicity or the multi-agency services that are available to assist persons who are impacted or if they become victims, provide a range of service. And I think if you look at our reports then, it talks about the numbers that were high risk, low risk, medium risk and no risk. If you look at that section, it breaks it down into the number of calls that we received. Does that answer? Yeah.
Yes, it does. And the same remains that total recorded crime accounts for just 11% of all incidents.
Yeah.
So that means that most of the crimes that you are responding to are not actually being filed in from the public. Is that
No,
what
so no. So again, this is very important. So 9/11, the Department of Community Engagement receive all the calls through the 9/11. Well, can receive all the calls. We explain in our system here, a person could call in person to the station, or a police officer on patrol can encounter it. We use what's called the RMS system, and they are all incidents initially. It's entered as an incident. From then, it's decided, it's assessed through a crime management unit and through supervisory input. Does this reach a crime threshold? And if the incident then transfers to a crime, it becomes a crime. And what we're telling you here in the report is of the 34,000 plus incidents that were referred or dealt with by police, only 11% of those were converted to actual crime classifications.
You guys have various stats listed: violent crimes, domestic violence, sexual offenses, drug crimes, for 2019, 2020, and 2021.
Yeah.
All of those show obviously fluctuations. Some are steadily increasing. From your perspective, which of the stats have shown the most worrying increases over the past couple years?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier on that burglary has shown a downward trend over the last 4 to 5 years. We sit back and we say, how can this be sustained? I don't envisage we'll reach a stage where there will be no burglaries. But what we did this year was we provided you with a 2019 comparison, purely to let you know that pre-COVID crime was operating the way we'd expect it to operate as we go forward, moving from a COVID environment. So we're leaving COVID out of the equation, and we provided 2019 comparative figures. So it wasn't just 2020 and 2021. We provided that comparison. So to put that in some kind of context, the 2021 figures are probably more comparable. It's a more realistic comparison to 2019 than it is to 2020. And you'll see lots of reductions. But each week, and more than each week, sometimes on each day, we have to look and see what's happening. Bladed weapons becomes a thematic issue with the nightclub economy opening up mid-last year. Firearms last year, mid-year. Traffic fatalities become a major issue. Domestic violence becomes a major issue. Child protection becomes a major issue. Digital forensic enhancement opportunities, international money laundering investigations through our now CIBFI. We have multiple strands coming at us that we really have to keep monitored on a daily basis to make sure that we're addressing all of these issues. Frontline policing never goes away. Their interaction with the community through community policing or schools liaison or traffic accidents, whatever it be, that's all happening. And then outside of that, there's a multiplicity of requirements for policing that requires new skills, specialist skills, or development of existing skills from our personnel.
That's all my questions for now.
Thank you.
Okay, Indrel from Cayman Compass. Would you like to come up?
Good morning. My apologies if I repeat any of the questions, Commissioner.
Good morning, Andrew. Yeah.
I think perhaps the best way to start is just to pick up where Felicia left off. A lot of the crimes that the police seem to be tackling have wider societal impacts in that there are issues surrounding the cause of the crimes. What is police doing to help eradicate the actual cause of the crimes as opposed to simply addressing them after the fact? So let's start, first of all, with the incidents that we're seeing in the nightclubs, in the parking lots, the shootings, the stabbings, the sexual assaults. What's police doing to tackle those incidents and to help prevent them from happening?
So an awful lot, and I'll hand over to Deputy Commissioner Walton, who's dealing on that, but we have engaged with the chairman of the licensing board and indeed the licensees themselves, and particularly at the Strand, because that's where the centre of activity is. But if I could ask Deputy Commissioner Walton to speak specifically to the action that has been taken and overseeing to deal with this, I think that would be...
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew, for the question. I think it's an important question. We've certainly over 2021, we've had numerous meetings with the Liquor License Board Chair, the Department of Commerce and Investment. So just looking at the trade and business license side of it, looking at the liquor license, we've collaborated as well with the owners. So we've had meetings with the owners of the nightclubs. We've had meetings with the security companies, and that's continuing. Just recently, we had a meeting specifically 2 weeks ago, or 2 days shy of after the incident at the Strand. We had a meeting with the owners at the Strand, discussing the issue there. Also going in there, we've had community policing, went and did a scoping exercise. We've identified some of those what you would consider dark areas as far as lighting, as far as CCTV, areas that need CCTV. We've already identified, and fairness to the owners, they're doing everything they can to ensure the security of their patrons. That sort of work, that type of work is continuing. In addition to that, we look at the music and dancing law. So there are infractions around that. So we've communicated as well with all of the licensees island-wide. We had an island-wide inspection. That's in collaboration with the DCI as well as the Liquor License Board Chair. And we just inspected every single liquor license premises from east end to west. We're just identifying some of those licensees that were breaching that Sunday music dancing legislation. We've identified those. Over the past week, we had 4 that were clearly had breached, and we're now looking to prosecute those 4. And that's a strong message. So that's the enforcement side of it, but there's the education side of it. So in continued collaboration with the Liquor License Board, we have sent messages out there to members of the public in terms of and the licensees what you can't do, or what is expected on Sundays. As far as the nighttime economy, we've static duty at the Strand. We've got officers now posted outside of the Strand on the weekends, and that's going to continue in the foreseeable future. We did have, what I will say is, prior to in 2021, we had in June static duty there, but if you recall, with the reintroduction of the nighttime curfew, I suppose, if you want to call it that, where the clubs were closed at midnight, because we were putting officers in static duty at midnight because there was no further need to put officers in static duty, and then it reopened. So we have restarted that program. So that's one of the operational aspects of it in terms of that static duty, but as well as looking at partnering with the Liquor License Board, partnering with the DCI, partnering with the owners, and doing everything we can possibly do to safeguard patrons going to those locations.
That report that you just mentioned, DC Walton, will that report be made available to the public as far as the report where you're speaking about the various liquor licensing?
No, so what we did there was working with the Liquor License Board chair. What we did was did all the inspections, and we provided the Liquor License Board chair a full report of our findings. So we've given that to the Liquor License Board chair. It's left for them to determine how they want to proceed. But I know that they've taken a number of actions since that.
Duly noted. And you said there are four different entities
The most recent inspection process, which was a week ago, there were 4 that were clearly in breach of that music and dancing law.
Thank you.
And we will be looking to prosecute, yes.
Commissioner, when you first took over, you had made mention that your intention was to strengthen the community policing program and to rebuild that rift that had grown between the community and the police. Where are you with that?
Yeah, good question. Hard to measure, but the tangible feedback from what it is, we're doing quite well. So I get the opportunity to meet a lot of our public elected representatives right across the island, and I get informal and formal feedback. And more recently then, in the last 2 years or so, we have engaged community safety officers to supplement the community policing unit. That is a dedicated unit that works in dedicated or specific communities dealing with quality of life issues that really impacts at ground, at street level. And then more recently, and he's here this morning, Inspector Lang has taken over as the head of community policing for the Cayman Islands, an officer who has dedicated many years to community policing in West Bay and understands the value of it. So you go back to the value of community policing across the islands. That is your interface with the community. That is your most valued interface with the community, and requires us to exert great effort to achieve trust and confidence and respect from the people that we're entrusted to serve. I'm very pleased that Inspector Lang, recently promoted to Inspector, has been given that portfolio, and I know he's going to commit to it, and he is available to speak to you afterwards if there's some specific questions. I do think we have made some significant progress. That's the feedback I'm getting. I don't think we've arrived at our destination. I think it's a journey and will likely always be a journey. But there's some really positive feedback coming in from the community about collaboration and more positive responses from the police service and particular officers from the police service. And certainly my experience and the experience of my colleagues, I'm sure won't differ too much, is that not every police officer will make a good community police officer, but the ones that do excel in communities, they go above and beyond, and they're available to assist people in the community to deal with concerns that they have, and then they feel that they have a channel of communication. So my assessment is we have made some pretty good progress. We're putting the right people in the right place to do the jobs. We're doing pretty good, and even on the sister islands now with the allocation of additional sergeant and our chief inspector has gone over, we expect to see greater or enhanced community collaboration over in the sister islands, so not just Grand Cayman. So my assessment is we have made good progress, more to be done, but certainly a journey that we're on.
Commissioner, what's the total complement of the RCIPS at present?
So we're working on it at the moment there. We're 485 485 in total. And that includes, it fluctuates slightly with people moving and coming. The 22 new recruits that we received last week obviously helps us. Of that 485, we have 34 which are specialist personnel, so they're not actually police officers, but they're pilots and tactical flight officers and scenes of crime personnel. And then we're supported by, I think it's in the region of 64 civilian support personnel and HR, finance, administrative secretaries. So it brings us to the point where police service is made up of more than just police officers. There's a significant portion of support functions, and it also includes our business centre, which processes police clearance certificates. So there's a mix there, but a total 485, and then the Coast Guard is working at 22 at the moment. We're working at 22 at the moment, which is in addition, and that will increase by between 7 and 10 this year, and we expect that would increase again next year as it stands, and I would anticipate that we would have commenced a further recruitment class by the end of 2022.
So if 485 personnel to keep the police service going, let me preface this by saying the court, the Cayman Islands Court, I believe it was the Grand Court that recently returned a verdict against the uniform policy that you had implemented, stating that while it was a good decision, it was nonetheless an irrational decision. And when you were introducing the policy, you were stating that this would see more officers on ground in boots, so we'd have a stronger police presence throughout the community, while at the same time officers would also be getting a bit more time for themselves. Now that the court has ruled against that policy, what's the next step? Does police go back to the prior policy, and how will this affect policing in Cayman?
So a good and a very important question, and I suppose one that the community have a right to be interested in. I'm quite restricted in what I can say because the matter is under appeal.
Yes.
And I don't know when the appeal is going to be heard. It would seem like be near the end of the year. What it means is that there's an issue of leave at stake. There were 3 points to be considered, 2 considered in favour of the debate by the Commissioner of Police and 1 against. So my sense was I needed to look at it in terms of governance and accountability, and I suppose other people looked at it in a different way. So we will have to wait the final outcome, but the intention is that we would have had more people working on the ground. I do have to wait for the decision now as to find out, do I need to revert or can I continue with the same policy, and I certainly don't want to preempt the outcome of the Superior Court decision. That's as much as I can.
Duly noted.
Yeah.
Duly noted. Police Commissioner, you stated that, or the report states that, of the calls that the 911 centers received, 11% were actionable crimes that were reported. Of that 11%, what's the closure rate for the RCIPS? How many crimes have the police been able to effectively solve and or prosecute?
So this is the question that Wendy had asked, and it would be difficult because of I mentioned the point, it's the same question, leading and lagging indicators. So a crime committed, we'll call it January, but not detected until June or July, because there's statements to be taken, CCTV to be trawled, witness to be interviewed, file to Director of Public Prosecutions, ruling to be received. But we know from our own evidence, and I mentioned just specifically the machete attacks on the weekend, 3 machete attacks or 3 serious bladed weapon attacks, all detected. So we know they're detected. We know that there was 2 firearms crimes over the weekend, jewellery stolen. We have a suspect. We know there was an armed robbery last night. We believe we have a suspect. We know that we had a number of shootings, gang-related shootings mid-last year. Almost all of those people responsible or involved have been arrested, not all prosecuted. So we're finding ourselves not so much closing the crime, it's investigating the crime, identifying the suspects, but not reaching a threshold for detection or to write the crime as closed. And some of them are still quite active, and we can explore that further with the detective superintendent in terms of the work his major incident room has to do, leading on multiple serious crimes simultaneously, sending files to the director. And maybe if you go back to the serious crime review team and you've read all the articles that have been published, crimes that are 10, 12, 20 years old remain on the books and can still be investigated once we can pursue definite lines of inquiry. So I think we've some work to do in terms of getting this detection rate onto our books. It requires some modifications to our computers, and it requires us to look at the counting rules. And at the moment, you'll notice we're adopting the UK counting rule system, and that's purely for issues of integrity and ethics, that we can stand over the data that we're producing here. So I wouldn't be comfortable producing detection figures, but I am happy to say that we have significant detections made across a range of crime categories.
I see. My apologies for this for re-questioning.
No, I think it's probably just a different way. Same question, just asked in a different way. Yeah.
No worries. Sexual crimes are on the rise. According to the report, a 2% bump or thereabouts in sexual crimes.
Yeah.
And we're seeing where crimes are being reported in places that you'd least expect, in the parking lot of a library, on a busy sidewalk while someone's jogging. What's the RCIPS doing to tackle these sexual crimes and offences?
Yeah, so I mean, sexual crimes, I suppose you've mentioned one crime took place in the library that we're aware of pretty recently, and we are reviewing CCTV, which is very poor, and we haven't actually detected that crime yet, although it's a serious crime. But then go back to late last year and early this year, where we had a lone male pedal cyclist cycling around and a female jogger. We've detected those two crimes occurred in 4:30, between 4:30 and 6:30, same morning, same suspect on the bike. That person is arrested, brought before the court, bailed, pending trial. We have looked at that as potentially linked to two previous assaults late last year. Same MO, lone male on a pedal cycle early hours of the morning, Georgetown Central in the area of Eastern Avenue. So we're looking at that pretty seriously. Our CID unit are looking at that, and I think we've made good progress in terms of narrowing down. So the advice is crime prevention, be very careful to our female joggers who are out early in the morning. They're entitled to go out jogging, be unobstructed or unaccosted by any male or anyone else for any reason. Notify family that they're going out, give the best crime prevention advice we can. And then for our part, our units then are alert to the fact that we do have females out jogging in the early hours of the morning. Be alert as you're patrolling.
Duly noted. I suppose time is ticking. So my final question really is, as far as we've seen where, well, I've personally been going through the coroner's courts, and we're seeing a lot of the crimes that are coming up that are now being ruled unlawful killings, death by misadventures, whatever, or, well, specifically the unlawful killings. What's the police doing to turn up the heat on cold cases?
We're constantly reviewing cold cases. As we've talked about all the way through here, it's trying to build the trust with witnesses and victims. So in a lot of cases, we have got information, we know what's happened, but we need to turn that into evidence product to be able to progress a case to trial and to conviction. So that does take a long time. Sometimes we have to wait until gang members change allegiance, you know, that they've got reason to come and tell us evidentially what's gone on. So it's a constant evolving feast. The major incident room, it comes back to your detection rate, is very, very successful. And obviously, if we can get it right at the beginning, we're solving close to 80% of the major crimes that go through our major incident room now, first time round. So it means there's less cases going into the cold case system over the years. That's improved quite significantly over the last few years. So improving the current systems is the best way forward.
Okay.
I was going to touch on the detection rates. I know the Commissioner did. There's different crime types will obviously have different detection rates. So assaults that happen within the family environment or within the domestic environment, the suspects are almost certainly known. So we expect there to be a much higher detection rate to serious assaults, maybe in licensed premises, you know, attacks, machete attacks, things like that. So burglaries, for instance, there's rarely an immediate suspect. So the detection rate for burglaries we would expect to be a lot lower than domestic violence assaults. I would say, and it is one of the takeaway features, burglaries are at the lowest rate they've been, certainly in 20 years that I've seen records. We've got burglaries down to a very low figure in comparison to other figures. And part of that is because we are detecting well over 20%. I've set a target of 25% detections for burglaries. We're well over 20%, but as the Commissioner said, there's a lead and a lag period on that. But that means we're putting 1 in 4, 1 in 5 of the burglars in prison. And getting to your point, what are we doing about prevention? There's really good relationships with the prison, with DCR, rehabilitation, trying to divert these people away from their criminal behaviours. A lot of the time, we put them in prison for one offence. We know they've committed 3, 4, 5. We get sprees and spates of crime types, particularly burglaries, and we know when we catch someone, that spree stops. So we know they're responsible for a lot more. But we'll refer them through HMP, through DCR, DCFS later when they come out. And there's a range of methods and partnership approaches that we put in place to try and divert people from this type of behaviour. And it is reasonably successful. So our burglary rate has dropped significantly. We did the same a good few years ago with gun crime and firearms crime. One of our strategic aims is relentlessly tackle the perpetrators of crime. And we went after the gang members, the significant gang members, and we locked up a lot of them. We made it quite a hostile environment for them to operate in. Unfortunately, last year we've seen a resurgence, and we're going to do the same again. We're going to concentrate our efforts. We prioritise different crime types at different times. At the moment, it's going to be serious violence. That's the growth. One comment I think it was Wendy made about domestic violence. It's actually on a decrease. We're bucking the world's trend. Domestic violence reports went down last year, which is, I think, good news. We introduced last year some innovative projects and policies. We sought injunctions on behalf of reluctant victims, and we got injunctions against persistent offenders. We really pushed victimless prosecutions. So when police officers turn up and gather evidence themselves of assaults, domestic assaults, we have gone to worked in partnership with the Director of Public Prosecutions and got prosecutions and convictions based on the police evidence without the victim. We don't want to do that if possible. We would like the victims come forward because we can help them a lot more. If they participate, we can get them onto protection schemes and everything else. But if we have to, we can prosecute ourselves. We did that on a number of occasions. I think that's added to and helped the reduction in domestic violence crimes. Recidivist offenders have been curbed.
I know I said that was my final question, but I would be remiss not to ask this question, and I'll choose my words as carefully as I can. Please, Commissioner, the public perception on marijuana and the acceptance thereof seems to be shifting. And we're seeing where there are a lot of people coming before the courts for minuscule amounts of marijuana. Suggests the officers are actively also tackling the drug crimes. And what is the police's intentions on drug-related crimes, specifically, dare I say, marijuana, going forward?
So I think we can address that pretty quickly. We're here to enforce the law as it stands. We don't make the law. So it's at the moment it's a criminal offence as it stands, and when that changes, then if it changes, then we'll adapt our policies and our processes. I understand the debate that's taking place. I'm engaged in the debate at my level, and while I might have personal views, I, as a public servant and as the Commissioner of Police, then I'm required to enforce the law as it is enacted by Parliament.
Duly noted.
If I can say, Andrew, we had less possession charges last year than we did the year before. But that was probably last year, 2020, was an anomaly. It was a strange year. We had curfews, stop and search. People shouldn't be out on the streets. And we found more possession offences. Last year, we concentrated on the supplying and the importation offences. And we were very, very successful there. I think it's
$4 million worth.
$4 million of drugs coming onto the island, £3,500 of ganja being imported in, and I think we are confident to say that with that ganja comes guns, and it is a whole criminal organised crime activity that we have to combat. But we had a significant increase in cocaine seizures last year as well, and cocaine can easily come the same routes as the ganja. So we have to enforce drugs laws. We have to.
Duly noted.
And
Thank you.
Andrew, before you go, just to add on, and I know it brings us into this year, but I mean, it might be recalled we seized 19 kilos of cocaine in February of this year, with a street value of just under 1.5 million.
1.4.
1.4 million.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not that there are no drugs on the island, and I know you're differentiating between marijuana, ganja, and cocaine being a different drug, but it's not the drugs is not a problem or something that doesn't need to be addressed. It has huge societal impact right across the social strata.
I will guarantee you the majority of the violent offenders that we arrest have got drugs histories. They're drugs offenders as well.
Duly noted. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe that's all the media we have in a... Oh, Wendy, got another question? Please come up.
I'm really sorry, I forgot about this, and it is a little bit specific, but it's just that it has come up a few times, which is the concerns that people have about call-out. So, for example, the recent Spots incident, I think the gentleman's now been arrested. There was a beach incident where women were on their own. And,
Yes, an assault, yes.
but the claim was, like, obviously that these things happen, but what I'm saying is it took more than, I think it was 45 minutes for the police officer to arrive when the women were saying that he's here attacking us now on the phone kind of thing. And I think there's a little bit of a concern about that time lag. I wonder if you perhaps can sort of explain, and also the other side of it is, what do you want us to do about it? I think people don't always understand that when police say to victims, what do you want me to do? They don't quite understand why that question is being asked. Because I know sometimes it's a fair question, because do you want me to prosecute this or not? But can you just give some reassurance about these two issues?
Yeah, so those circumstances you mentioned, females on the beach being assaulted by a male, that's a criminal offence, distinct. There's no grey area there at all. And when you request a policing response, it's meant to be a priority response because it's a crime in action. And I mentioned that I had allocated an additional 11 constables to the Eastern District, which is where that actually sits. And then we would hope to improve our response times in terms of the availability of our resources. We do have officers, when they're involved in an incident, they're abstracted. We have a limited number of officers that are abstracted dealing with other incidents, and it's trying to get them away from that incident to deal with the waiting incident, if that makes sense to you. So it is a priority call. We do need to respond. 45 minutes is far too long for an incident of that nature, but in that case, we have identified a suspect and the case is being processed. And the director will make a decision on a prosecution.
And can you just explain that issue of, like, what do you want us to do about it question? When police ask people that?
Well, the message I would give to the police officer is it's really the complainant. If a complainant makes a complaint, our function is to investigate it, submit a file, and the director then decides if there's a prosecution. And it seems in the case, as I understand it, there are grounds for that could ground and sustain a criminal prosecution.
So they shouldn't really be, the officers shouldn't really be saying that?
No.
Okay.
I don't see it, and we certainly wouldn't encourage it, but it's a message that we can take back to our personnel to, if a complaint is made and we're asked to respond, we investigate the complaint.
If I can add on that, there have been a number of occasions, it's Cayman kind, it's Cayman culture, where the victims want to give the suspect benefit of any doubt, and they ask for suspects to be warned, ask for no action to be taken by police, apart from just tell the person not to do it again. And I would encourage, please, try and allow us to make that decision, because if you look at the incident in isolation, it might be worthy of a warning. But if that person's had warnings previously, then that victim won't know that necessarily, and we should be making that decision. And the immediate reporting officer might not know that history either. So once it's been reported and it's been investigated and looked at, there might be alternative options for dealing with this in a better way. So I fully appreciate the victim at the time trying to be kind and be beneficial, but sometimes there's a bigger picture that needs to be looked at. And I would encourage people to be prepared to be witnesses. We will deal with things appropriately. If the person deserves and needs a warning, we can do that, but we'll do that with the victim knowing all of the facts. So please give us the option of dealing with it any way we can, but by limiting ourselves, by saying I'm not going to give evidence, only give them a warning, that does mean that's probably the only option we've got, because we haven't got the evidence to put to the DPP for an alternative.
Thank you.
That concludes the official Q&A part of the
Just a closing.
session. Yep. Commissioner, you'd like to make some comments?
So just
in
a
closing?
closing statement, to wrap it up then. We note that the borders are open and we expect to return to a pretty normal policing and security environment, and we're prepared for that. It has to be said that there are only very small numbers of persons engaged in serious criminal activity on the islands. Yes, we have our challenges, as any jurisdiction has, but I think one of the key messages for the Cayman Islands is it is a very safe place to visit, to work, to reside, and to have your vacation with your family. Only over the last couple of days I saw the increase in tourism across the 7-mile stretch and the beaches and the persons walking along, and I thought it was a great sight to see after such a period of, I suppose, nobody being there, and we certainly encourage that, but to stress the message that it is a very safe place to be, the Cayman Islands, and I think the crime figures substantiate that view. What I do have with me today to accompany for anyone that's interested, I have my department leads from a number of our key areas, including child protection, our crime task force, our International Financial Investigation Bureau, from our Digital Forensic Hub, and our Community Policing Department, from our Crime Management Department, and they're all there to deal with any specific issues or something you might be concerned about, or something you want to delve into a little bit deeper. I'm conscious that we, as the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, are community-based, and we are anxious to ensure that we are connected to our communities. And with that, I thank you for your attendance today here and for the presentation of our 2021 report. Unless the Deputy or the Super has anything else?
Nothing.
No. And I think we're...
Thank you. Thank you to our panel, and thank you for the media for attending, and that will wrap things up. As the Commissioner said, we've got members from the RCIPS here, so if the media would like to speak to them, just let myself, Jodie or Mikhail know and we can introduce you. Thank you.